There are great games you can spend 1,000 hours in and still want more, and there are also games where after 40 hours you would rather spend an entire day sticking stamps at the post office than play even one more hour. Why is that? The scale? The gameplay itself? One thing is clear. Filling a game with hundreds of hours of content isn't something you just write down in pre-production. It's a privilege earned by the systems beneath it. And sometimes less really does mean more. So instead of keeping this abstract, let's talk about a very concrete example. Let's compare Tainted Grail, the so-called Polish Skyrim, to RPGs made by Bethesda and CD Projekt. Tainted Grail is a AA RPG that officially launched in May 2025, yet it often feels like a game caught between a massive ambition and its actual systems. And calling it a bad game would be completely unfair, because it's actually quite good. The first 20 hours feels like a never-ending wow effect. The art direction is striking and refreshingly unique. The atmosphere is thick and immersive. The story is intriguing. And despite clunkiness being present almost everywhere, it leaves a genuinely strong impression. If this video were a review, it would be a largely positive one, but it's not. You see, I am the kind of player who avoids fast travel in games like Skyrim or The Witcher, and out of sheer respect, I listen to every line of dialogue, even if I've already heard it thousands of times, and yet here after 30 or 40 hours, I found myself skipping dialogue, fast traveling whenever possible, and praying to Azura for this game to end as quickly as it could. I barely recognized myself, so I asked a simple question. Why? And this is the conclusion I came to. The thing that makes you keep going in a game in the first place is the feeling that you are truly present in its world, that you exist there through your avatar, the character you control. At least in open-world games, because if we were talking about chess, the conclusion would be very different. That sense of presence acts like an anchor. Every other emotion a game gives you depends on it. It's what makes you invested. Without it, you could have the best gameplay loop in the world, but if you are not invested, you won't even feel the dopamine hits. And without those, the experience quickly becomes dull. And that's exactly what happened to me in Tainted Grail. It felt less like being in a fictional world and more like pressing keys while staring at the screen. But that still doesn't explain two things. Why I was genuinely hooked and immersed during the first 30 hours, and what went wrong in the second half of my playthrough. On paper, everything seems to be in place. The gameplay is fine, visually the game looks good. And this is exactly where the comparison with Bethesda and CD Projekt becomes unavoidable. Let's take a closer look at what these games consistently do right and why Tainted Grail fails in the very same areas, because trust me, the key difference here isn't the budget. You could summarize the difference in a single word: randomness. You see, our brains crave novelty. Novelty is what makes things intriguing and colorful, and it's incredibly difficult to achieve in games. After all, no matter where you look, RPGs, FPS games, action adventures, there are only so many genres and only so many core ideas. You can't reinvent the wheel every time. In fact, you usually end up doing the opposite. So novelty has to come from somewhere else. Both CD Projekt and Bethesda achieve it, but in very different ways, through the same core idea: world simulation. In Bethesda games, every NPC belongs to some ideological or factional group, like the Stormcloaks or Imperials in Skyrim. They follow daily routines that are surprisingly complex for games of this scale, and they don't just exist, they interact with the world around them like actual inhabitants, talking to each other, eating and drinking, hunting wolves near town, or even attacking you because you stole an apple. The same goes for animals and monsters. They have routines, behaviors, and even a basic food chain they exist within. Say what you want about Bethesda, but very few games offer world simulations this complex. Every time you boot one of their games up, you are likely to see something new. An NPC does something stupid, or someone reacts to your actions in a completely unexpected way. Or maybe during a simple horse ride, you stumble upon animals fighting each other, completely disrupting your journey. That kind of simulation creates an immeasurable amount of randomness and with it, nearly infinite novelty. A game that can still surprise you after hundreds, even thousands of hours. And it doesn't stop there. Bethesda's RPG systems add even more randomness on top of that. In Fallout 4, you can build robots from countless interchangeable parts, creating combinations no one else will ever replicate. In Skyrim, alchemy lets you mix hundreds of ingredients in whatever way you like, producing entirely unique results. Just a few examples, because I don't want this video to be an hour long. When the core systems are this strong, a game earns the privilege of being massive. You can fill it with thousands or hundreds of hours of content, because that content is supported by deep systemic simulation. Bethesda doesn't just design content, it designs conditions for things to happen. When it comes to CD Projekt, they approach world simulation from a completely different angle. In games like The Witcher 3 or Cyberpunk 2077, it is much closer to what Rockstar did in GTA 5 era than to Bethesda design philosophy. Individually, their NPCs are far less complex, but there are many more of them and they behave far more naturally. This creates a world that feels convincingly alive. Cities feel loud, crowded and chaotic. Villages feel intimate and grounded. CD Projekt isn't trying to build a world you can live in for hundreds of hours. They are building a stage, a cinematic background for your character designed to fully immerse you in a moment. And that creates novelty as well. A street in Novigrad will never look exactly the same twice, constantly reshaped by different combinations of people, just like a real city. Instead of experiencing radically new situations every time, you experience new moods, fleeting, unique to that specific moment. And sometimes that's just as powerful. And this is exactly where Tainted Grail collapses. People like to call it Polish Skyrim. I'd call it something else, a vow dream. You can see that there was an attempt, but the word simulation is almost non-existent. NPC routines boil down to something incredibly simple. Stand at one point during the day, go to bed at night. And even then, you can't interact with them, you can't wake them up, you can't disrupt them in any meaningful way. Towns feel lifeless. A handful of brain-dead NPCs follow two-step daily routines, and that's it. I've never even seen two different animal species fighting each other outside city walls. Everything feels like a static asset placed in a specific spot and nothing more. When it comes to RPG mechanics, things don't get much better. Technically, just like in Skyrim, you can play as a sword fighter, a mage or a stealth archer, but the perk trees, despite offering many different perks, feel overly simplistic, often boiling down to flat bonuses like plus 10% damage. And other systems like alchemy simply fail to capture that same Skyrim feeling. And this explains the problem perfectly. For the first 20 hours, the game feels incredible. The art direction is beautiful and unique. The story is intriguing, unlike anything you've seen before. And novelty does a lot of heavy lifting. But once that novelty fades, the illusion breaks. After 20 hours or so, the world no longer feels fresh or mysterious. You are left with a hollow shell, a dummy of a world that simply can't carry a 100-hour experience on its own. And once that happens, you become completely disconnected from the game. Art direction and the main storyline are the only two things that occasionally surprise you and keep you going. Everything else, which is easily 95% of the experience, starts to feel like beating a dead horse. So here is my message. Sometimes in games, less really does mean more. Especially if you are a AA studio without massive budgets or endless resources. In that case, every possible cent should go into building a strong foundation. Solid systems, tightly integrated with gameplay, capable of keeping players engaged without relying on sheer content volume. Only after that should you start thinking about adding more. If that results in a 30-hour game, that's perfectly fine. But if your systems are held together by goodwill and duct tape, and you tried to cram 100 hours of content on top of them, then your priorities are simply out of whack. And that's exactly what happened in Tainted Grail. That said, I want to make one thing absolutely clear. I genuinely like this game and honestly, fingers crossed for a sequel. Because after playing Tainted Grail, the Fall of Avalon, I'm confident they can make something truly great in the future. This just wasn't the time yet. But what about you? What's a game you could spend hundreds of hours in without getting bored, and why? Was it the story, the systems, or the world itself? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to check out another one, where I explain why, in my humble opinion, Skyrim is a better game overall than The Witcher 3. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.